Simone, can I ask you to join me? And that means click the button, go on stage. There you are, there you are. Wonderful to see you.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you. It works.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in I'm in Belgrade.
Belgrade.
So yeah.
That's
yes.
not Shanghai, or you've been. You work from Belgrade these days, or is this just?
Yeah. I moved here around 2 years ago, and so now my studio is based between here and London.
Now, we'll do a really short introduction and then I'll ask you to just take over the stage. But you are a product and interaction designer. You develop things for the future, sometimes fictional, sometimes real, sometimes stories, sometimes things, which sounds super dreamy and artistic. And at the same time, you've actually done work for BMW, Philips, and Dumais Museum of the Future. So you connect to really big organizations with very poetic ideas. Now, I know you have a lot of students listening. Looking back, as when you were a student, was this what you had in mind? How did you end up in this particular space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had no idea that I would end up here at all. Whatever here is as well, as you say, it's kind of a mixed. I like to explain that I basically do future products and interactions. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they're fictional, depending on the situation. When I studied, I actually studied in Delft, and at the time I think it was really, really early stage of connected products and this type of work. And I ended up doing sort of like a design fiction master thesis that was not really, I didn't even know that it was called design fiction at the time. I kind of discovered it later because someone told me that what I did was design fiction.
Which turns out to be a complete field. I mean, you're not the only one. I mean, there's actually.
There is and now I'm also working with the fathers of design fiction, which is a near future lab. I didn't know that doing this sort of like experimental project would then also help, kind of working with companies. I worked for many years in frog design, more as an interaction designer, but always pushing, this kind of experimental.
Now, and before we dive into your presentation, to all the students that are listening, what would you recommend? What would you say they should do? I know this is super tough, and nobody knows where they will end up, and it could be.
I would say try to do something that is clearly not expected by your teachers. I mean, if you put your teachers in a problematic situation to understand what you're doing, you're probably in a very good spot.
Amaze your teachers.
Also to confuse them. Yeah. Exactly. Push the limits. Good. Especially when you're a student, after you need to have real clients. So that's always I try to tell my students as well.
All right. I'm going to invite you to do your presentations. After we have a little bit of time for questions for everybody who's listening. Now, put your questions also in the chat, so I'll pick them up from there as well. Or, we can see later on. But floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's see if this works. And present. Okay. I will just jump super quickly through but what I try to talk about today, and actually after Iskander also told me about the team, about everything, the talk is kind of, I don't know, I never kind of talked about this, but it's something that is in the back of my head for the last couple of years, which is more than human design studios. But before getting there, I mean, I'm not going to say this again, but as I used to, but now it's almost 10 years that I work in this field, and I think I was in the first ThingsCon back in Berlin, which now feels a long time ago. I used to kind of explore and experiment at the early stages of Internet of Things, and I did this project that was the project I was saying that I got in trouble in with my professors in TU Delft. And in the next years, I was really interested in this idea of, how does connectivity intelligence create these things that are now we're talking about everything more than human and so on. Over the years, I also went a bit more experimental. I used to run with some friends a collective called Automato Farm, where we went deep into even creating object-driven VR perspectives, where basically we got people to become Roombas and fans in order to understand what is the point of view of things around us. And in the past 3 years now, before actually starting the studio, the Oyo, which I will tell a little bit about, I've been working on this huge mega fiction, which is part of the Museum of the Future in Dubai, where we are also actually touching a lot on this sort of more than human future. So with like robots and AI intelligence living in our everyday life. And as Monique said, just to confuse a bit more, I also wrote a book which is called Everything is Someone, mainly because prototyping takes a lot of time and actually writing stories was faster. So that's also another thing for students. Like when you have like a good vision, a good scenario, also putting it down on paper might be a faster way to get it out of your head rather than embarking in a huge electronic-based project.
Simone, I'm so sorry for jumping in, but your slides are not full screen.
What?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everyone's able to see what you're showing.
Sorry, I'm in the wrong. I shared the wrong. I was gone. Okay, stop sharing. Sorry. Thanks. I think I just shared the. Okay. This one. Okay, now you see.
Yeah, that's
screen?
it. Cool. Okay. I'll help out again. Sorry about this.
No, thanks, because I would have gone full on without knowing where I was.
All right. Okay.
So here are the things I was talking about. So in the past 2 years, I started with a friend of mine called Matteo Loglio, a studio called Oyo, which very much in line with the topic. Actually, the very secretive name, what Oyo means is Other Intelligences Operation. We do a lot of projects that deal with new technology and ways in which AI and machine learning and all these like weird new emerging tech become products in today and also influence our everyday life. But without further ado, so what do I want to talk about today with more than human studios? What does it actually mean? Well, basically, I think right now, as also like the organizer said, we're in this weird time where we already, we're past the cool time of IoT. We have a lot of technology coming in, artificial intelligence. It's part of our daily life, and it's this weird in between time where it's kind of things are a bit like people, but not really much, and we don't really know what does that mean. Actually, not only technology, but even law at the moment is confusing us even more because there are already a few examples of non-human beings and natural entities that are given personhood. So, how do we deal with a world where rivers have rights or citizenship? And this is also piling up on around 10-15 years of connectivity and technology that created new voices in our everyday life. So they used to be called spine, blockchecks, or general connected IoT products, but we somehow now expect things to have a point of view, a voice, a Twitter feed, which I always think it's somehow connected to our deeper need of animistic, kind of having nature again and things around us talking to us that we used to have probably a couple of thousand years ago. But beyond that, I think what's even confusing us even more is that now we have machines that learn, and they are new intelligence that we have to deal with, but also they are the intelligence that are not really human. This is my favorite GIF of how basically this algorithm is learning how to hit a target, and rather than throwing a ball, it just kind of runs towards it. So it's very non-human way of thinking, and we have to think about it and see how how to work with them, how to live with them. And and if you put on top of that also all this work on ledger-based DAO, I'm gonna say blockchain, but now you can actually have things that can be truly autonomous. They can create, they can make money, still in the digital world. But what does it mean for us? But this is kind of very general topic, but I like always to zoom in things that are a bit more practical and kind of everyday problem. And recently I've been really thinking about, how we are very excited about this in general, about having AI and everything. But when it comes to work, when it comes to us, it's all cool until, oh my God, AI wants to take our job. So there is a lot of excitement, but there is a lot of fears. And I'm always wondering, like, why are we scared of this? And, is it really going to happen? And what can we do about it? Are these other, let's say, things or other intelligences actually really going to take our job? And yeah, I think one of the problems is that we have this sort of, I would say, almost masochistic dream of automating our life, making whatever activities easy, but even design, making design so easy that can be made by a machine. And this example here is, I find it amazing. It's a new automated design tool from Alibaba that created 600,000 banners in a day. So basically taking away pretty much all the work of a designer and just leaving, you as a trainer of this algorithm. But luckily enough, this is also pretty much it's one of the mainstream vision of how, let's say, non-humans will interact in the world of design. But luckily, there is other sort of visions. And a couple of years ago, I saw this talk by Matt Jones, that now is the head of Google AI UX. And he was talking about a different model of thinking of how we can actually collaborate with the machine, how they would actually work with us, in any sort of task. And he was talking about this whole concept. There is the concept of the centaur, which is an idea that comes from Garry Kasparov. That was, I don't know, there are a lot of young people, so probably I don't know if you know it, but it's basically a chess player that was the first human beaten by a machine, by a computer, in a chess game. And as after going crazy about it, he actually decided to team up with a computer. And actually by combining man and machine abilities, he managed to beat any man or machine by themselves. And this is kind of what I find interesting. It's like, rather than seeing these as, other intelligences or things that are going to take our job or anything, it's like, why don't we just, kind of collaborate? And what does that mean? And a few years ago, I found this example from actually like a science fiction writer called Robin Sloan, that he kind of created by himself a piece of code that would allow him to co-write a piece of fiction. And what's interesting about it is that in his mind, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it actually makes it harder, because the result is just better, because it's weirder. It's something that he would never even come up with by himself. So this is kind of the basic idea behind what we are having in mind also at Oyo. And so how do we build then for a future in which we will have half man, half machine as part of a design process? So what are the bases for building a human design studio, more than human design studio? And we already started this process. So when we started the studio, we also decided to hire a bot. So right now we are 4, let's say, carbon-based designers and 1 non-carbon-based designer. So we start asking, what does it mean to have a non-human designer in the studio? Like, where does it live? What is it in general? And first of all, we kind of just named it, and we call it Robbie. And this is Robbie. At the moment, what Robbie does, it's basically a chatbot. But the interesting bit about it is that he lives in our Discord. He actually communicates based on different prompts, but also he generates new sort of a conversation. He creates, his own little pills of wisdom. He gives us information, but also we end up most of the time just chatting with him randomly and see where we're going. So it creates new conversations around the project, even if it's not really smart. Asking Robbie a question about something that we're talking about and getting a random response creates a completely new workflow and a new way of thinking about pretty much anything. But beyond that, what we did also is that we see Robbie not only as a bot, but also something that we train. So an instance of Robbie is actually a series of machine learning models that we train over time in order to create inspiration, weird objects, weird graphics, that they're not really finished projects or finished products, but they help us with this sort of raw machine inspiration. And also, we kind of automated him also to be able to post on Instagram and have his own sort of social media agency that help us, share weird things like products that he dreams or very cheesy quotes or very dark quotes sometimes as well. And I think right now, this is just like a first stage, but like a first step, but also like it's something that we open source and it's available. It's an available starting point for anyone to create their own, let's say, non-carbon based designers. The second thing that we've been doing a lot in order to create this vision of the More Than Human studio is really diving in this idea of how do you brainstorm with a machine? How do you brainstorm with something that is not human? So how do you harness, how do you use another intelligence that is weird and not human to come up with different ideas? And I think all of this started, back in 2015. This was the first vision of they used to be called puppy slugs, which were these images that came out from Google Deep Dream first algorithm that were basically reversing the process and coming up with these weird ideas and this weird vision that somehow ended up being puppies and slugs. But it's kind of created these images that are not really human, but that you can interpret them in whatever way you want, and you can come up with meanings behind it, etc., etc. So we kind of started building on top of new technology that came out, the more accessibility to this sort of generative algorithm, to create a process that right now we use a lot, especially not only internally but also with students. And we have a lot of workshops that we kind of call them, designing with intelligence or creating your own design machines. And what this is all about is kind of figuring out that if you can train, let's say, an algorithm to generate images in this sort of like machine learning way, it's like, it's kind of like collaborating with something that thinks in a completely different way. It's kind of, rather than seeing the world in 3 dimensions, actually what like a generative model is, it sees the world in its 512 dimensions. I don't even know what it means. And so what we do is kind of we help students curate a set of images, whether they're products, posters or whatever, and kind of go through this process of learning how to train a generative adversarial network, come up with somehow this exploration, which is actually the main thing about it. It's not really about the technology per se, but it's how it changes your decision-making process as a designer. So rather than just brainstorming a few ideas, you're kind of wandering in this infinite space of things that pop up and variation and morphing things. And most of the time, they're not really finished things, and actually that's the interesting bit. They're just something that you can process as a snippet of information, like you would do in a brainstorm with a person, but with this sort of infinite wandering possibility. And actually what's interesting is what comes out of it is also unexpected. In one of the latest workshops in Geneva, some students just wanted to create places that didn't exist. So they trained an algorithm on various like kind of satellite imagery of island, and they created islands that do not exist. Some created their own sort of Lego blocks that are all generated, and they created this all new product, which is like AI generation Lego blocks. And some went even quite dark, and they decided to generate little saint and little religious kind of sentences, which is a very kind of typical, almost like generating a religion. So I think what's really interesting is that when right now there are a lot of tools that allow you to do this, and also we really want to try not only ourselves to explore ideas through this, but also add more and more designers and more students having a conversation with an algorithm and coming up with things that they didn't even think they could before. But I think, besides, the sort of imagery of this weird glitchy world that comes out from working with artificial intelligence, we also went a step further and said, okay, but what if we need to design actually objects? Like, you cannot really design from an image. You have to, create a new process, one in which you don't necessarily leave everything to an algorithm, but where you also need to involve a human, like a designer. And where does this happen? So what does it mean to really co-design an object with an algorithm? And a couple of years ago, we worked on this project that was an exhibition part of Shenzhen Design Week that was about basically exploring what new design can happen when you merge cultures, when you merge places. And so what we did, we rather than making a machine generate images of product, we trained kind of a text-based machine learning model to design briefs. And what's interesting about it, that these briefs were kind of coming from description of electronics products from China and some sort of furniture from Scandinavia. And then we generated like a bunch of briefs, and then got actual human designers to interpret them into products. And what's cool about it is that a machine can come up with, a kind of an algorithm come up with very, very weird things, but also things that, kind of inspire you. One of my favorite one was ceramic for Android only. But I just show you what the kind of object we came up with by mixing up description of plugs and batteries and chairs. We had this battery pack adapter chair, and on the left you see the actual physical model designed and prototyped by a designer in Sweden. By combining description of game controllers and vases, we got this like ceramic game controller, which was then designed by a designer in Finland. And by combining phone screens and phone parts with lamps, it ended up being this phone display chandelier that was designed by a local designer at the time. Whew. And I'm almost done, and I'm almost out of time, but I just want to show you the final step. Or I don't know if it's the final, but it's the next step that we're working on to kind of go even further with this process of more than human design studio. And we call it artificially crafted products. So the idea here is like, you can generate images, you can generate briefs, you can then, do things by yourself as a person and kind of, design a product. But what if you can create a truly centered process where every step is always a conversation between a person and a machine? So what if, every decision from, ideas to selection to 3D making to production, it's like a constant, machine-human collaboration process. And we're working now on a series of products that we call the Artisanal Intelligence, and hopefully they will be out to be able to be purchased soon. But I just want to show you a bit behind the scenes without showing you too much. But the idea, again, it's like there is this quote from Ernesto Rogers that was talking about how a designer and an architect should be able to design from a spoon to the town, like every level. So, for instance, where would a machine start to to design and why, machines to start design very complex things. So let's start from the basic, from, a spoon. So what we've been doing is like we're trying to figure out a way, and we almost finished to combine the world of artificial intelligence all the way to the world of craft. So combining these very opposite worlds of like high technology and generative design with people that do things by hand. And what we're doing now, it's really creating this new flow, this new process where every step of the way is made by a conversation with a machine. So we train an algorithm to give us designs. We actually wrote also like a script in order for the machine to assess what is the best design. Then we throw it into a generative design tool to create 3D, and now we are actually physically producing these objects. Hopefully this will be soon available also to be purchased in around January. So stay tuned into Oyo's channels. If you're not part of it, you can find us online. But yeah, just to summarize, and as I've been a little bit over, I think, like what I find interesting about this process is that it's really like a different way of looking at human and things collaboration. So, in the future, I really believe that we're gonna have all of our studios probably will have their own, trained machines, and they're all hired bots. We're gonna have to partner with them, and this is gonna make design a lot harder and not simple. And ultimately, just enjoying being a centaur. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. I have 100 questions, and I'm not allowed to ask all of them, but I'm going to ask 2. And I know we already ran a bit out of time. This is terrible. At the first speaker already, it's completely fine. But what struck me is that in your description of how the machine can generate new ideas and you can train it, and you still very much make a relation between the machine and the individual designer. And one of the projects you showed, Botto, of one artist, Mario Klingemann, but what he does is actually let the machine generate lots of ideas and then have a distributed group of people help him decide what the best ones are and sell those as NFTs. Very clever, of course. But so it also changes a little bit who's the designer, because now it's a whole big group of people that are becoming co-designers. Is this something that you can see happen in the future more?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Bot is for me, an amazing example of combining, all these like distributed thinking plus, autonomous, let's say autonomous design in itself. But I think what I find interesting is still the small scale of, let's say, a design studio. And I think, yes, I mean, there is a lot of, ideas of co-designing or like, more like wider audience. But I still think there is going to be a space in which, people like me or other students, you will want to, curate my own tool, and you do already, and use it, for your own as a way to explore. So I think, both ways will work. I think but I also don't like the fully autonomous, fully distributed. For me, it's not really. I mean, I think you lose track of then a bit of agency, you as a person.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be the balance. Yeah. How do you keep this balance between having agency as a human and giving agency to a group or to a technology?
All right, so you still, your concept is based on the designer as the central creator that works with all the tools they can have. It's a combination. Yeah, it's a combination.
Yeah, well, I think because, for us, for instance, Rob is always a part of a team, Yeah. It's a tool is a teammate. It's not a tool.
At the beginning, we discussed that, the students might outrun their teachers and come up with something that is way beyond what they could even imagine. Can you already see the beyond? Or have you already been struck by students that say, well, okay, I'll take this, I'll run. It's a very new field. I mean, you are definitely ahead of the game. But
I think luckily there is a lot of, I see now a lot more students looking into technology, like, for instance, machine learning models to do work, it's going to become so normal that then what they will come up with, hopefully, will be the next step.
But we first need a whole generation of people that understand machine learning, of course. That group is not too big at the moment.
Yeah, but I see now it's interesting, like 20-year-old students doing their own machine learning models to come up with visual identities, and it's really interesting. 10 years ago when I was studying, we were doing Max MSP and processing, and that was like the edge. And now they're using Runway and doing generating stuff. So I think there is going to be something that will come up from that, but I haven't seen yet what it is.
Okay. Very urgent questions from the audience should be posted right now, because if not, we're actually going to continue with the next speaker. 4 speakers plus the competition in, framework of a few hours. How can we as a designer take biases into account? That's a big question. That's a big question. That's a separate talk almost, but
Well, I mean, you just have to embrace them, because whatever. I think for me, the whole concept of bias is that bias are there anyway. So either you embrace it and you make it clear, because whatever you're gonna choose to, let's say, whatever, for instance, the data set that I use is biased by default because I choose it. Whatever output I choose is biased because I choose it or someone else chooses it. So for me, it's more about making it transparently biased, and just if we have transparent biases, then you can either take it or leave it. So anyway, it's a big discussion because we were talking about bigger problems.
And it's big, and some of it is also, some of the biggest machine learning things were developed on a very limited number of data sets, and those data sets were white people, for instance, or people that happen to have their pictures online at a certain time in the universe. I mean, that's a limited but let's not move into the database the bias discussion right now. Might come up later on again. Simone, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.